Welcome along, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in Slovakia, just outside the country's capital of Bratislava. The whole paddock is reconvening after 2 weeks, having raced in Most in the Czech Republic, and we are here in Slovakia at the Slovakia Ring for the Slovakian Grand Prix, which forms the penultimate round of the 2023 season of the ESET Cup series. And this is the jewel, this is the diamond, this is the main race of the weekend and main category of the weekend. It's the GT Sprint number 1, Saturday's program. We've just done the Renault Clio Cup race and we are about to go rumbling and roaring here in Slovakia. You've seen the aerial showdown really for the spectators in this sweltering heat, 30 degrees Celsius. And beautiful weather actually that's welcoming all the fans and all the drivers and all the teams, but at the same time it is incredibly hot, which is only adding up to the challenge of the weekend. And the whole racing field is now already prepared on the starting grid to get going for the first 25 minutes of racing action of the day. And what a field it actually is. 35 strong. We have got 35 drivers in the machines on the starting grid in multiple categories as usual, and we have got something extra on our hands here in Slovakia, because should the conditions be suitable and let's say should the maths add up together correctly, we might already be crowning the ESET Cup Series champion here in Slovakia already with one race to spare. Of course, as spectators, we usually like that to be going down to the wire and to be decided on the final weekend of the season, but that's not always the case, and it's not a reason to get bored by, but actually to take a hats off to the drivers and teams that have dominated all season long. And it has been Filip Salaquarda and the Czech team of ISR that have been absolutely dominant all through the season. Basically, they lost the first sprint of the season to Trevor Racing's BMW and, back then, the American driver Neil Verhagen. Since then, Filip Salaquarda is yet to be beaten. And just as the spectators' eyes are now glued to the sky, everyone else is getting ready on the starting grid. As I already mentioned, incredibly hot, 30 degrees centigrade. So it must be around about 1 million inside the cockpit of any of the cars on the grid. So you'll just understand how much of a challenge that actually is for everyone. We've actually got a couple of onboards. We've got, if I'm correct, we've got Matěj Pavlíček definitely, who's carrying the onboard camera for this event. So we might actually be visiting his office. This was Libor Milota, last year's series champion. But we've also got a camera in Matěj Pavlíček's car, so we might be hearing from him a little later on. Matěj Pavlíček, of course, wanting to score a victory in the GTC class. We have got multiple classes, as already mentioned. The fastest of them here in Slovakia, the D5, the prototypes, basically the Le Mans prototypes, and usually we've got one in the hands of Miro Konopka, the local hero in the legendary colours of ARC Bratislava. But this time they have got an opposition that's beaten them in quali earlier on today actually, and it's Dan Skojdopole from the Czech Republic taking the outright pole position and putting his prototype on the first row and first grid slot of the whole starting grid. This time pole position, of course, being on the inside line, because we are about to have a rolling start, as is usual, for the GT sprints and GT endurance races. Miro Konopka on the grid as well, just like he was 2 weeks ago in Most, but this time not behind the wheel of his Lamborghini Huracan, but in the LMP3 Ligier. The Bratislava's Huracan is on the grid though, but this time with Zdeno Mikuláško returning back to the field and meeting the local fans, greeting the local fans, and actually giving them something extra to cheer for, because Zdeno Mikuláško put the GT3 Lamborghini Huracan in the colours of ARC Bratislava on the front row alongside Dan Skočdopole. Behind them, it is Miro Konopka. Always popular, always smiling, always lovely to chat to. And alongside him, last year's champion, Libor Milota. There he is, sitting in his office, about to go working. What a working weekend this is for Libor Milota and for every other driver on the grid. Libor Milota, second in the GT3 class on the grid, but of course with the beautiful view ahead, not that many cars ahead of him, and that only means that he can actually take that fight for the race victory. He even beat the so far nearly unbeatable Filip Salaquarda in the qualifying. Libor Milota did a wonderful time of 1:59.5 and was the last one to actually dip below 2 minutes. It was actually a pretty mixed up qualifying, it needs to be said. It was a 25-minute qualifying that actually saw 3 red flags, no fewer. So that was a really big challenge for all the drivers to actually find a space around this track, even though it's quite long, 5.9 kilometers, but still to find a space for themselves in the 35-strong field and still go for a clean push lap. Not an easy task for any driver, for any engineer. So a rather mixed up grid. Libor Milota second in the GT3 class. Behind him, further 2 GT3 cars sharing row number 3. This time it's Filip Salaquarda, the championship leader, only third in the GT3 class. And alongside him, the German driver Nicolas Leutwiller in his Porsche 911 GT3.
Vypni a zapni zapalování z baterie.
Last cheers, last discussions with the engineer, last hints and tips before we get going. And of course, also the VIP guests and the team guests and all the other personnel that was present for the grid walk, shall we say, now having to leave the grid and only leave the drivers and the machines there for the race to start. So, first 6 positions we've covered. We've just mentioned it's Dan Skočdopole in his Ligier LMP3 on pole. Alongside him Zdeno Mikuláško sharing the front row. Second row of the grid, that's Miroslav Konopka and Libor Milota. P5, Filip Salaquarda, and P6, Nicolas Leutwiller. Behind them, Stefan Rosina taking his turn behind the wheel of the BMW M4 GT3 prepared by Trevor Racing. Gregor Žigo, who's usually behind the wheel of that car, is actually taking a weekend off. He is in the paddock, but this weekend he's handing the car to his colleagues. And it's actually Stefan Rosina. We've had him on the grid multiple times, and we've actually also have him win the ESET Cup series overall in the past, so he's a known name to the grid and to the championship. But he will be sharing the driving duties a little later on in the endurance race with the Daytona 24 winner, Jesse Krohn, no less. And Jesse Krohn is going to take the wheel of the M4 Beamer in tomorrow's sprint. So, a lot to be looking forward to. Packed field either way. Joachim Galash taking pole position in the GTC class. Joachim Galash just about beating his teammate Matěj Pavlíček. Matěj was, let's say, a little disappointed after Friday. He was neither here nor there with the car. And the team made some good progress, really good work overall and overnight, and the tables turned dramatically. I just had a very, very brief chat to Maciej earlier on today, and he said that he was maybe 1,000,000% happier than yesterday. And it already shows in the lap times. So it is Joachim Galasch taking pole position in the GTC class for the first GT sprint of the weekend in 2 minutes 1 second point 2 in his Lamborghini Super Trofeo, or Lamborghini Huracan, if you will. And alongside him for the GTC class lead, Maciej Pavlíček, this time only about 0.4 of a second adrift of his teammate. It was much worse yesterday, but really they dug in the data, they rebuilt the car, and the situation is like a night and day for Maciej Pavlíček today. He's still a little behind his teammate, so still the motivation is there, still the hunger is there, still the eagerness is there, and we're only about to see a wonderful fight for the GTC class victory. As usual, you may remember the fantastic photo finish the last time out in Most 2 weeks ago. Then there was, of course, a penalty applied as well, which robbed Denis Vasek of a victory, but he had been overtaken under yellow flags, which only meant that he was always going to lose that victory. And it was Maciej Pavlíček actually then scoring a win in Most. Joachim Galasch comes to Slovakia on the back of a rather mixed weekend, because he was on course to take victory, but then he was hit with technical trouble that made all of his work come undone. But this time he's back on top and he wants that victory. We also had a chat earlier on in the paddock, and he just says, I really want to make up for that, and I really want to take that victory and only cement and confirm the situation at the top of the GTC class field, and that is of course the championship lead. We have got one of the cars left on the grid, which is the Radical SR10, driven by Jacek Zielonka, Polish driver, car number 88. Jacek Zielonka back on the grid as well. Not the first time this season, but back on the grid as well. And Jacek Zielonka actually unlucky for the start, because he has to be pushed away from the grid. Oh, now he's got going again, so he might be able to rejoin, but he won't be able to return back to his 12th place, because everybody else has already driven past him, which means he is not allowed by the rules to take back his 12th place on the grid. He has to start from the back, but he can start together with the pack and not really start from the pit lane, which gives him at least a couple of seconds in the race, but it's still going to be quite a big catch-up action this afternoon. Either way, Joachim Galasch, Maciej Pavlíček leading the GTC class, so the Mechanic Motorsport duo taking a 1-2 in the quali. What the race is going to bring, that might be a very different story, but let's see about that. Behind them, there is Piotr Vera and Denis Vasek. Piotr Vera returning back to the action in the GT3 car, in his GT3 AMG Mercedes, of course. And I've got one correction to make. Libor Milota, he was actually let's say P2 in the GT3 class in the quali earlier on today, but he was also penalized. He got a 5-place grid penalty for ignoring a flag, a red flag actually, in qualifying. So he's demoted on the grid, and that means that he is now 9th. Alongside him, Piotr Vera. Behind them, Denis Vasek and Jacek Zielonka, of course, now forced to the back of the grid. Behind them, Stanislav Jedlinsky returning back to the field. Petr Kačírek, Max Lámer, Petr Brecka, Jakub Klobása, Mariusz Nierychlewski, Tomáš Miniberger, Libor Dvořáček, Richard Vosic, Maťo Homola, the freshly crowned Eastern European TCR champion. He's back in the i30 Hyundai, and so many other cars. We've got quite a strong TCR field joining as well, but now everybody is back on the grid and on the start and finish straight. And when the lights go green, we are going to go racing, which we are right now. The race is underway, and it is the local drivers, Zdeno Mikuláško, taking the lead immediately. And you have got that white Audi of Filip Salaquarda forcing its way through immediately and slotting into third overall. Behind him, it is Stoffé Rosina in the GT3 BMW M4 in the Trevor Racing's livery. We have already got Mechanic Motorsport Gio fighting for the GTC class lead. So Zdeno Mikuláško leading from Dan Skoč do pole in his prototype in his LMP3 Ligier. Also Miro Konopka dropping down a little bit at the start, but still staying together in the mix for the race lead and trying to fight his way back to the top of the field. Then you've got your GTC Lambos, 35 strong field, so quite a lot of cars, quite a lot of places to look at. And we have got the change in the race lead. Dan Skoč do pole taking the lead back to his hands from Zdeno Mikuláško. Honestly, that was only a matter of time. Still, these two cars entered in different classes, but still hats off to Zdeno Mikuláško and his speed that he's been showing all through the weekend, mostly through the qualifying earlier on and through the opening seconds and minutes of this race as well. Skoč do pole back in the lead from Mikuláško, Filip Salaquarda third from Stoffé Rosina, and Miro Konopka. He's trying to find his way past, and it seems like the top five is already getting away from the rest of the pack. We have got one of the Mechanic Motorsports Lambo following in the GTC class lead. There we go on the grid, sorry, on the start and finish straight. Across the line we go. And on to the second one. Filip Salaquarda is not going to have it that easy this time out. He's been dominating the entire season. He was beaten in the opening sprint of the year in Germany at Oschersleben back in April. But since then he's unchallenged for the race victories. But we're seeing a very different picture this time out in Slovakia. Not only is he trailing Zdeno Mikuláško, but he's also having to look in his mirrors because he's got another very fast and very experienced Slovakian opponent filling up his rearview mirrors, and that is of course Štefan Rosina. Already the ESET Cup champion from basically way back then. Štefan Rosina, the 2015 champion of the ESET Cup series. Behind them, Miro Konopka, he's the three-time champion of the ESET Cup from 2013, 14 and 16. And there we go in the onboard of Matěj Pavlíček. And it's Matěj Pavlíček currently leading the GTC class, so he has already taken the better of his teammate Joachim Galáš, who's now down to 9th overall. Matěj Pavlíček up to 6th overall. So he really seems to be turning this weekend around so far. Matěj Pavlíček leading the GTC class. Miro Konopka has just set the fastest lap of the race in 2 minutes, 0.2. And we have got, and there's one of the cars in the gravel trap. That's one of the Porsches, as we also saw one of the other Porsches entering the pit lane, which was Petr Brecka in the GT Sports Technology 911. And we have got another 911 somewhere stuck in the gravel trap. There is a TCR fight a little further down the field. Ooh, very nearly a photo finish this would have been had this been the end of the race, but it is not. And we have got even a three-way, maybe even a four-way fight into the first corner. There's a Cupra, a couple of Cupras. There's the GT4 AMG Mercedes of Lemmer Racing. Driven by Matej Kosic, beg your pardon, and then looks like Amuno Pelete. There's the couple of Hondas and the Audi. That's the TCR field, also quite strong this time out, and even joining the sprints, not only the endurance, as they usually are. There is a big fight. You have got Libor Milota trailing the green and black Porsche, driven by Nicolas Leutwiller. There's the R8 Audi of Filip Salaquarda in the fight with Miro Konopka. Wonderful scrap for a position. That's the remaining overall podium spot. So Miro Konopka has already dealt with Stoffy Rosina, his countryman, and he is now trying to find his way past Filip Salaquarda. Across the crest we go. Hard underbraking into the right-hander. That forms the turn number 3 here in Slovakia. Skočdopole now leading by over 7 seconds ahead of Zdeno Mikuláško. Salaquarda trailing him by further 4 seconds. And this, of course, coming under huge pressure right now from Miro Konopka. There was the Huracan just flashing ahead of our camera, and it's the other ARC Bratislava car, which is now through. Miro Konopka overtaking Filip Salaquarda, which means that Salaquarda is now back in the fight with Rosina. Salaquarda versus Rosina in the GT3 class for 2nd and 3rd. And what a fight this is going to be. Look how close Stoffy Rosina now is to Filip Salaquarda. This is definitely not going to be a walk through the park for Filip Salaquarda this time out. He is going to have to fight for it. Stefan Rosina flashing his headlights, trying to use every trick in the book there is. Ooh, we've got one of the TCR cars pulling off. That's Nemanja Milovanovic in his i30 Hyundai, car number 365. And that seems to be a race-ending situation for Milovanovic. We have got yellow flag in turn 6. That would be for that incident. And there is Duck Racing's older version of the R8 Audi in the hands of Petr Kačírek. He was 14th on the grid, and now he's entering the pits, so not everything about quite right in the world of Petr Kačírek right now. Dan Skočdopole in the meantime holding the fastest lap of the race in 1:57.2. The only driver so far to drop below 2 minutes, let alone setting a lap in the 1:57 region. So Nemanja Milovanovic pulling off and out of the race. These are the TCR cars a little further down the field. If we just actually check that class by class, we have got Mikuláško leading Salaquarda and Rosina in the GT3 class. Then Antal Žigo nearly 14 seconds ahead of Matej Kosic, these being the only GT4 cars in the field. And then there is a beautiful fight in the GTC class. Matej Pavlicek leading from Joachim Galash. They are still away from one another in terms of the overall track position, but Galash closing in on his teammate, 1.7 seconds between them across the line. They have got Libor Milota between themselves, which is making it a little trickier for Joachim Galash, but still, look at that. Libor Milota trying to find his way through, and they are now going side by side through the last corner onto the start and finish straight, pushing each other to the edge of the track. Matej Pavlicek trying to stay in front of Libor Milota. There is no need for him to let him by, even though it's a different class, but Libor Milota now serving as a soft cushion for Matej Pavlicek between him and his teammate Joachim Galash, but not anymore because Milota is through and ahead, and that means that Matej Pavlicek has got Joachim Galash right in his rearview mirrors, and we have got the fight for the GTC lead on our hands right now. Joachim Galash immediately behind Matej Pavlicek and already lining up for a move, having a look down the inside. They cannot forget about Denis Vashek. He's been smart all season long. They always think they have the measure of him, but Denis Vashek, he's done this championship so many times already, and he's been behind the wheel of the Lamborghini Huracan for quite some time, so he knows his way around very well, and he's always ready to pounce and ready to surprise the Michanek Motorsport duo, as he's already done on a number of occasions. So this is now an open fight for the GTC lead among these three Lamborghinis, who are now close to one another right on the track. And we're only about to get to the halfway mark of the race still, so it's been pretty eventful, and that's only natural if you've got 35 cars on the track. They're bound to be together, they're bound to be close to one another. Oh, that's so close between Michanek Motorsports Lambos and Denis Vashek staying close to them as well in the mix. This is a wonderful fight for the race lead. Matej Pavlicek also trying the dirty tricks, literally just kicking up some dirt and throwing it into the face of his teammate. Him doing actually the exact same thing to Denis Vashek in the process. So they're actually really using every tool they have, every single weapon they have, to come out on top in this fight, weaving down the pit straight. Matej Pavlicek trying to break the toe and the slipstream for his teammate Joachim Galash. He's still behind, but Joachim Galash, he is the one holding the fastest lap of the GTC class in 2:03.4, but Pavlicek has done 2:03.5, not that much slower. Denis Vashek 2:03.8. And he would probably argue, I would have gone even faster, but these two guys are just holding me up. Behind them, Piotr Vera. So great to see him back on the grid. I believe it was Red Bull Ring in Austria when we had the Polish driver on the grid for the last time. He did not take part in the round at Autodrom Most. Tight and twisty infield section. Pavlicek still holding the advantage over his teammate Joachim Galash. There's Miro Konopka lapping some of the back markers, and he's already through and up and through on his teammates. Zdeno Mikuláško in the Huracan Lambo, but Mikuláško still comfortably leading the GT3 class. And there you see the R8 Audi back in the distance, so Filip Salakvarde actually reeling him in. How about the lap times in the past laps? 2:01.1, the previous lap for Mikuláško, 2:01.5 for Salakvarde, so he's not really getting that much closer. But how about this lap? It seems as though Mikuláško was a little slower this time out. Salakvarda is now past some of the other back markers in the TCR class. Skocdopola, meanwhile, enjoying over 20 seconds of a lead. A little bit of a shame that we didn't have Miro Konopka a little further up the field earlier on. Otherwise, we would have seen a fight between them for the race lead. Either way, it's been an eventful race so far, and we've still got just under 10 minutes. It just feels like this race has been going on for so much longer now, because we still have and always have something to look for and look at and look forward to. So Skocdopola leading from Konopka, Zdeno Mikuláško third, Salakvarda fourth, Rosina losing touch with Salakvarda. There is Stoffy Rosina. And there was Filip Salakvarda. Rosina still sees him ahead on the road, but he's way too far away right now to stage any sort of fight, any sort of attack. We've also got Maťo Homola in the field, the local driver, and he's the fresh Eastern European TCR champion. He was crowned with 1 weekend to spare, so to the season finale in Brno in 3 weeks' time, he's going to come with the pressure off, with the title already assigned to his name and confirmed. Maťo Homola, he's the sole car in the D4/TC class, but he's definitely not the only TCR car in the field. We've got Divizia 6, which is entering Franjo Dubreta and Zoran Kastratovic. We've also got Nikola Radnič, Grega Šimonovic, and further 5 cars in the TC 3500 class. But that's as maybe, or it's not as maybe, it's something that's not as important right now. No offense, but we've got another GTC fight for the race lead now. Joachim Galáš still right behind Matěj Pavlíček. There was one of the Cupras making way for the faster cars. Matěj Pavlíček having to go seriously defensive and actually being extremely clever, because this is a track featuring so many types of corners. You've got high-speed corners, you've got, you know, mid-speed corners, slow corners, everything. So you've got to have a good rhythm, you've got to have a good traction, you've got to be good under braking and position your car as best as you can, or as good as you can, because your opponent, I was going to say, but also your teammate at the same time, ready to pounce pretty much any time and anywhere. And Joachim Galáš, of course, trying to read his opponent. Joachim Galáš so close to Matěj Pavlíček. He's already had a couple of laps where he was able to study his teammate. And studying mode, that's the one that Joachim Galáš has been in for the majority of his life recently, as he's also trying to go through his university years. So combining racing with education, not an easy task, always a lot to do. And they are now re-entering the start and finish straight. Matěj Pavlíček still slightly ahead. Pavlíček weaving along the straight once again. Quarter of a second separating the Michanek Motorsport drivers across the line. Denis Vašek still in close third in the GTC, and he is he's basically keeping himself up close and ready should an opportunity come. Because even though Joachim Galáš is still leading rather comfortably in the championship, he's definitely always hungry for a race victory, so you may assume that he is going to try something if there is a chance. If you just look in the GTC, well, Leading comfortably he was before Most, but then the lead sort of disappeared. 71.5 points Joachim Galash has, Matěj Pavlíček 68, so 3.5 points separating them in the ESET Cup Sprint Series. So this is also for the championship lead in the GTC class. There is a GT3 fight. That's Leutwiler against Libor Milota, and they are gunning for the 4th place in the GT3 class. Someone's been off. There's a bit of dust, or quite some dust, kicked up in the air. There is the Michanek Motorsport duo, still seemingly in the same order. Pavlíček, the car number 66, Galash, the car number 11. And then the car number 100 in the hands of Denis Vašek. 4 minutes left on the clock. Matěj Pavlíček flashing his headlights furiously at the Cupra. Please let us through, do not hold us back. Well, please hold my teammate, that's something you can help me with, which is exactly what's just happened. And Matěj Pavlíček winning a little bit of breathing space in the process. Amazing fight for the GTC lead once again. Across the hill we go once again. Blue flags being waved to the back markers. Piotr Vera safely through on the Cupra. And there is a GT3 fight. Libor Milota having a look down the inside on Nicolas Leutwiler. It's the P4 in the GT3 class, and it's the P6 overall. And across the crest they go. Look how hard they go under braking. Milota tried it around the outside, maybe he just outbraked himself a little bit and surprised himself, but what a move that was. Didn't really win him anything, but at least put yet more pressure on Leutwiler, who just had to look watch his rearview mirrors, and they are still side by side into the final one. I don't think I've ever seen anyone overtake around the outside here. And across the line we go on to another one. There was Mathieu Homola in the i30 Hyundai. Again Leutwiler going defensive, and going defensive so well. And now they are running side by side, but this time, yeah, he left the door open on the inside. Wonderful switch back from Milota. And Libor Milota is now ahead. Pavlíček and Galash separated by 0.4 of a second across the start and finish line. One of the Cupras going slower. Libor Milota after a beautiful, beautiful attack ahead of the Porsche in the hands of Nicolas Leutwiler. He was trying to go defensive as hard as he could, and he was making that work for quite some time. But then Libor opted for a switchback, exiting the first corner, found enough space down the inside, and he's now robbed the German driver of his P6 overall. So, how about the GTC fight between the Michanek Motorsport Lambos? Let's see how that one is going. We saw them coming across the line, 0.4 away from one another as well, but again. And Denis Vašek 1.4 seconds behind them. So let's try and find the Lambos. Cars number 66 and 11. There they are, so close to one another. This is such a great shot. Such a great angle of this camera. It just shows you how quickly they're coming into the hairpin and how hard they are braking in that downhill section. And the car's working wonderfully with the suspension trying to work against the dive of the car to make the platform as stable as possible. And now they are running already almost side by side. Slide for Galash. And yeah, this just got the better of him for now. The time is up, so we now have to wait and see where the race leader is. But this robs Joachim Galash of a chance of fighting against his teammate. He was so close to Pavlíček, but then made a mistake halfway through the corner. Maybe, just maybe, Matěj Pavlíček brake tested him a little bit. We would have to wait and see that once again. I don't know what happened exactly there in terms of the positioning of cars between the two, but suddenly Galash found himself sliding a little bit, had to, you know, go for the corrective action, and that just made him lose momentum and lose touch with his teammate. But this is the race leader, and this is going to be the race victor. Dan Skočdopole scoring the overall victory in the GT sprint this afternoon here in Slovakia, and Dan Skočdopole dominating. This is a lights to flag victory for the Czech driver in his LMP3 Ligier car number 3. Miro Konopka will come home in second overall, car number 4, but 25 seconds adrift. And this is Zdeno Mikuláško on his way to the GT3 victory on the first time of asking in 2023. Zdeno Mikuláško coming across the line to score his home victory in the GT3 class. Wonderful stuff from the ARC Bratislava man this weekend. Filip Salakvarda, second time of the season where he's beaten in the GT3 class, but he's ahead of all the drivers he needs to be ahead of, which only extends his championship lead, and that's crucial for him, so he's ever so closer. Matěj Pavlíček coming across the line to take that desired victory. He looked even, well, was it him? No, may have been the other. It may have been Libor Dvořáček a lap down. So we might still have the GTC Lambos on the track somewhere. That was probably Libor Dvořáček a lap down. There they are now, coming across the line. Matěj Pavlíček taking the victory as they are now coming across the line. Matěj Pavlíček 1 second ahead of his teammate Joachim Galash. Denis Vašek in the end 3/4 of a second behind Galash, so it was again a very close 1-2-3 in the GTC class, and this time it is Matěj Pavlíček, and it just completes the wonderful weekend turnaround really yesterday. If you met both of the Michanek Motorsport guys, one of them was smiling and had that playful spark in his eyes. That was Joachim Galash, who was doing so well yesterday. Matěj Pavlíček, on the other hand, not really happy about the way the weekend was unfolding up to that point, and even seemed a tiny little lost at places. But then the team worked on his side of the garage really well. They did find the cause of the problems that also made the brakes so nervous and vibrating, and the overall balance simply improved quite a lot. Matěj Pavlíček responded with a very fast qualifying time. Still, he was 0.4 of a second behind his teammate, but then in the race he fought for it, took the lead, and then never gave it back. Joachim Galash was always close, was always putting on pressure, and he was making it, you know, graduate and simply come to the climax on the final lap. Unfortunately, he made a mistake through the final corner on the penultimate lap, lost momentum, lost touch with his teammate, and then never caught him again on that final tour. And Matěj Pavlíček just didn't allow his teammate to rob him of that GTC victory. Denis Vašek this time did not have the measure of the Michanek Motorsport guys, so he watched them as in the cinema, front row seats, but he only could see the Michanek Motorsport scoring 1-2 finish here in Slovakia in the first sprint. There is yet another one, still another one to have tomorrow, so still quite a lot to fight for. and the championship fight is still wide open in the GTC class. Dan Skoč do pole taking the outright victory from Miro Konopka, Zdeno Mikuláško, third overall, winning the GT3 class from Filip Salakvarda, Stofi Rosina and Libor Milota. Nicolas Leutwiller coming home seventh and therefore fifth in the GT3 class. GTC class won by Matěj Pavlíček from Joachim Galáš and Denis Vašek. Then Piotr Vera 11th from Tomáš Miniberger. And looking at that class-wise, Tomáš Miniberger, he is the winner of the GTX class. He's the only entrant in that class for the weekend. Maťo Homola taking the victory among the TCR cars, and we have got Antal Žigo beating Matěj Kosic for the GT4 victory this afternoon on his home track. So, what an eventful GT sprint this was, and this serves us yet again as a wonderful invitation for the endurance race later on today, and also for all the other races tomorrow. We've still got the second sprint and the second Clio Cup race coming up tomorrow. The GT endurance race, of course, coming a little later on today. Not exactly sure precisely when. I'm going to give you a rough estimation because the entire timetable has already been a little bit delayed, and it might still be delayed even further still should there come any further issues in any of the upcoming races in the meantime. But either way, the plan for the endurance race today is to start at 17:35. It's going to be a little later than that, but not much, hopefully. So just make sure that you're back for that. And for now, it is a very warm, it's a very hot, it's an incredibly hot. Goodbye.